It's 1:02. I think we can start our event. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon.
Non si
And
sente. Ah, questa sta parlando.
Can you hear me?
Chi è questa? Ah.
Can you hear me, Ambassador Mariangela?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh,
How are you?
okay.
Good to see you.
Good afternoon, Excellencies. I'm really happy to host you this afternoon, jointly with IFAD and WFP. I think we can start our event, so I really want to welcome you to the 2020 World Food Day. For those who don't know me, my name is Carla Mukavi, and I am the director of the FAO liaison offices to the United Nations in New York. And I'm really pleased, again, as I say at the beginning, to jointly with the IFAD and WFP host you in today's celebration. Some housekeeping, just to let you know, to invite you to mute your microphones. And really please read the housekeeping rules at the chat box. I'm not going to take time. I'm sure that all of us are now familiarized with the new normal. So let me really say that the World Food Day celebration started earlier today in Rome, where heads of FAO, IFAD, and WFP spoke united against hunger, a message that was echoed by Pope Francis and other high-level dignitaries, including an inspiring speech by our host in Italy, His Excellency, the President, Sergio Mattarella. 2020 World Food Day is unique. It marks the 75th anniversary of FAO and comes at the heels of the Nobel Peace Prize awarded to the World Food Programme. I take this opportunity to congratulate colleagues at WFP. This recognition turns the eyes of the international community to the scourge of hunger. It underlines the importance of international solidarity and multilateral cooperation and gives us renewed energy to work hand in hand to end hunger and build a better world. All of this could not be more relevant today when we are having our first virtual World Food Day, not for choice of our own. It is a challenging moment as we are struggling with the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Over 75 years, we have seen progress in terms of food security, but there is still a long road ahead. Even before the pandemic, an estimated 690 million people went hungry in 2019, up to nearly 60 million in 5 years. And a staggering 3 billion people could not afford a healthy diet. COVID-19 could worsen the situation and tip over 130 million people into chronic hunger this year. So this observance is more than just a celebration. It's a call to action. And it reminds us of the urgency today. So I would say that, of course, what we will have this afternoon, we will hear from our food heroes. Some of us are really with us today here. Those who are acting now in response to COVID-19. And our discussions are also relevant in the context of the 2021 UN Food Systems Summit, which will look into how to transform food systems and deliver progress into the entire 2030 agenda. Let me just conclude by saying that this will be my last World Food Day celebration in New York. as I move on in my career to serve the organization as a FAO representative in Kenya. I would like to thank all of you for your support and close collaboration throughout my 5 years tenure here in New York, ahead of the FAO liaison office. And what I could say is that we shall meet again. So without further ado, let me start with the musical performance that the United Nations Orchestra has kindly agreed to perform on this special occasion.
On behalf of the musicians of the United Nations Symphony Orchestra, I have the honor today to introduce our virtual musical contribution to a celebration of the World Food Day. The music we are offering today, Edvard Grieg's Morning Mood, inspires us to visualize the coming of a new dawn that will revive our respect for humanity and its natural environment. So, please join us now. The new dawn awaits.
Thank you very much. What an amazing performance. Thank you for United Nations Orchestra for this encouraging beginning. I now want to announce a video message from His Excellency, the 75th session President of the General Assembly, His Excellency Volkan Bozkır, who will play the video message.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for the invitation to speak today. Allow me first to say a big happy birthday to the Food and Agriculture Organization. As the oldest permanent specialized agency of the United Nations, FAO plays a critical role in addressing hunger and improving nutrition. In its 75 years, FAO has likely touched upon the lives of billions of people, improving agricultural productivity in countries and communities around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, I would be remiss if I did not also take a moment to express my sincere gratitude to the food heroes who worked and continue to work tirelessly throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. From farmers and food chain workers to drivers, shop assistants, and food bank representatives, including here in New York, millions of people helped to provide sustenance and nourishment through difficult times. We commend you and we thank you. The impacts of COVID-19 will be felt long after the immediate health impacts are addressed. High levels of unemployment, loss of income, and rising food costs are making access food difficulty for many. And measures to control or mitigate outbreaks are already affecting supply chains. Food security and nutrition remain highly susceptible to disruption. This is particularly worrisome for least developed countries, conflict-affected countries, and those most vulnerable. As it is, the world was not on track to achieve SDG 2 on zero hunger even before the pandemic. And if recent trends continue, the number of people affected by hunger could surpass 840 million by 2030. We must embrace food system reforms. The upcoming World Summit on Food Security is an opportunity moment to accelerate these reforms and to forge new partnerships that can remove barriers to ending hunger, enhancing nutrition, and providing food security. Looking to the future, we must also involve and empower young people to become the next generation of leaders and reformers in agriculture and food supply chains. I would like to again thank the food heroes who have fed us these past 9 months and express my appreciation for FAO, for the World Food Programme, and for the International Fund for Agricultural Development, for their work with member states to build more sustainably resilient food security. Thank you.
Thank you very much, His Excellency Volkan Bozkır, President of the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly, also for recognizing the role of the food heroes and the need to empower young people. We will now hear the message by His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations.
The award of this year's Nobel Prize for Peace to the United Nations World Food Programme recognizes the right of all people to food and our common quest to achieve zero hunger. In a world of plenty, it is a grave affront that hundreds of millions go to bed hungry each night. The COVID-19 pandemic has further intensified food insecurity to a level not seen in decades. Some 130 million people risk being pushed to the brink of starvation by the end of this year. This is on top of the 690 million people who already lack enough to eat. At the same time, more than 3 billion people cannot afford a healthy diet. As we mark the 75th anniversary of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, we need to intensify our efforts to achieve the vision of the Sustainable Development Goals. That means a future where everyone, everywhere, has access to the nutrition they need. Next year, I will convene a food system summit to inspire action towards this vision. We need to make food systems more resistant to volatility and climate shocks. We need to ensure sustainable and healthy diets for all and to minimize food waste. And we need food systems that provide decent, safe livelihoods for workers. We have the know-how and the capacity to create a more resilient, equitable and sustainable world. On this World Food Day, let us make a commitment to grow, nourish and sustain together.
Thank you. Thank you for the message from the Secretary General recalling us that we really have to grow, nourish, and sustain. Let me now welcome our first live speaker today, the President of ECOSOC, His Excellency Mr. Munir Akram. Excellency, you have the floor. We are really very honored to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Carla. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to join you in commemorating the World Food Day and the 75th anniversary of the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. This year's Nobel Peace Prize could not have come at a better time to stress that peace is not possible without food security. I would like to express my sincere congratulations to the World Food Programme for this prestigious recognition. As we speak today, the COVID-19 has caused havoc with the lives of people. The global economic slowdown caused by the pandemic is affecting all four pillars of food security: availability, access, utilization, and stability. Agricultural and food markets are facing continuous disruptions due to labor shortages caused by lockdowns. The income decline has impacted food security and put food access at risk. The most impacted are, as always, the poor and vulnerable, as they spend 70% of their total income on food. Ladies and gentlemen, it's clear that even before the pandemic, we were not on track for SDG 2. It is regrettable to note that today, the cost of a healthy diet has exceeded the international poverty line of $1.9 a day. That is making it unaffordable for the poor. The current trend suggests that the number of people affected by hunger will surpass, as the PGA mentioned, 840 million by 2030. The COVID-19 would further add between 83 to 132 million to the total number of undernourished around the world in 2020. This will translate into stunted growth for 144 million children. Ladies and gentlemen, to overcome our challenges, it's important that we address the core issues. First, we must ensure that food supply chains are not disrupted due to the crisis. We can create, like the Chinese, green lanes to ease transport, production, and distribution of agricultural inputs to food markets. Secondly, we need to invest in sustainable agriculture-related infrastructure to ensure market access for remote and small-scale farmers in developing countries. Third, trade is an important component for availability of food and stability in its prices. We must therefore adhere to the rules of fair trade under the World Trade Organization and in accordance with the interests of the poor. Fourth, sustainable agriculture technologies must be made available to developing countries on concessional and preferential terms. The Technology Bank for Least Developed Countries and the Technology Facilitation Mechanism at the United Nations provide opportunities for actions in this regard. Fifth, billions of dollars of agricultural subsidies by industrialized countries in the agricultural sector have led to chronic overproduction, surpluses, and distortions in global markets, which make it impossible for small-scale farmers in developing countries to compete on international markets and at times even in domestic markets. Agricultural reform is therefore needed to make these trade practices fair and equitable. Ladies and gentlemen, I intend to explore how ECOSOC's mandate and mechanisms can be used to promote such reforms. For the past 2 years, the HLPF has provided a prominent occasion to launch FAO's flagship publication, which provides an overview of the state of food security and nutrition across the globe. The Food System Summit mentioned by the Secretary General next year will also be a major opening to ensure that our ambition for zero hunger by 2030 translates into actions and reality. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, promoting a robust multilateral response guided by global solidarity remains at the core of our response to the current pandemic. On this World Food Day, I encourage you all to work together and scale up collective solutions to advance sustainable development. Only by working together can we build back better, get back on track to realize the SDGs, and reduce the vulnerabilities to future shocks and disasters. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President of ECOSOC, and also for encouraging us to work together to attain the SDGs and Agenda 2030. Thank you again for honoring this event with your presence. I now have the honor to give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Maria Angela Zappia, the permanent representative of Italy to the United Nations, also to recall that Italy is the chair of the group of Friends on Food Security and Nutrition here in New York, and is the host of the RBAs, including FAO. We are really very pleased, Ambassador, to welcome you. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, dear Carla. And of course, I want to thank the Secretary General, the President of the General Assembly, the President of ECOSOC for their very important remarks. And dear colleagues and friends, as chair of the group of Friends of Food Security and Nutrition in New York, but also promoter and member of the Food Coalition in Rome, as well as representative of the host country of FAO, WFP, and IFAD, I'm truly honored to celebrate the World Food Day and the 75th anniversary of the establishment of the FAO. The creation of the FAO in 1945 was a milestone in the history of the United Nations system. It started a virtuous process that through the subsequent establishment of the WFP in 1961 and IFAD in 1977 was the first fundamental step of the international community in concretely addressing the issue of hunger and at global level. As President Mattarella, the President of the Republic of Italy this morning said in Rome, 75 years after the awarding of the Nobel Peace Prize to the WFP is the greatest acknowledgement of how far-sighted that choice was. It is a testimony of the extraordinary job done by WFP together with all other actors of the UN system on the ground under exceptional circumstances and enormous pressure. It also is a testimony of the capacity of the UN to deliver concrete results and the confirmation of the centrality of the multilateral system in the response to this unprecedented crisis. I'm also particularly happy, of course, because Italy played maybe a small, but nevertheless very significant role in this extraordinary result. Not only Italy being the host country of the program is a staunch supporter of WFP activities, both in political and financial terms, it is also contributing through the Brindisi Logistical Center, the first one of this kind, and celebrating this year its 20th anniversary, which has been the central hub for the emergency interventions carried out by WFP in Africa and in the Mediterranean regions, amongst the most vulnerable areas of the planet. That hub has to function like a Swiss watch, and indeed it does. Many remarkable results has been achieved since in 1945, But unfortunately, as it was said, there is no room for complacency, and COVID-19 crisis risk, of course, to jeopardize many of the positive results achieved in the latest years. The pandemic is heavily affecting our economies, our supply chains, and therefore our capacity to deliver an adequate quantity of safe and nutritious food to our populations. The situation is dire, and we must keep our focus on the need to provide an effective response to the crisis, and at the same time on the urgency to work in a cohesive and coordinated way to create more effective, resilient, and sustainable food systems in the recovery and better phase. It is fundamental in the first place to focus on workers in the food supply chains, as well as smallholder farmers, on the workforce involved in the processing and distribution of food. Together with the workers on the health sector, let me tell you, these categories are the veritable heroes of this difficult time. The designation of agriculture and food sector workers as essential ones, a measure that Italy adopted since the outset of the pandemic, is a basic element that could lead to several other actions, such as tax exemption for independent workers, incentive for agriculture and food distribution sectors that are essential for the resilience of the food system. Furthermore, it is crucial to focus on the elimination of all barriers to food movement, on the reduction of food waste, on the extended use of digitalization and innovation in the supply chains, as well as on initiatives aimed at providing financial support to the MPMI and to the categories of workers, especially women and informal workers that are most exposed to the consequences of the crisis. The 2021 Food System Summit will provide us with a unique opportunity to concretely tackle all these fundamental elements. And Italy is really looking forward to contributing to it in a proactive and tangible way, also in its position as members of the advisory board and host of the pre-summit meeting in Rome next summer. As announced by Prime Minister Conte during the high-level week at the ANGA, it is our intention to put an emphasis on SDG 2 in the framework of the Italian presidency of the G20 in 2021, with a synergetic approach to the action carried out by Italy in the framework of the partnership with the UK on COP26 and in all other international fora, including the Global Health Summit, which will be hosted by Italy together with the European Commission next year. The active engagement of the private sector, the academia, civil society is an indispensable prerequisite for the achievement of the ambitious goal that we have to pursue. So really, as chair of the group of friends on food security and nutrition here in New York, we stand ready, Italy stands ready to support the UN system in achieving all these important goals. And a special thank you also to you, Carla, for the work you have done, and good luck with your next endeavor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Zappia, for your intervention, and particularly the issues that you have highlighted, very crucial ones to advance the agenda of ending hunger and ensuring food security for all. And thank you for your role and your leadership. I now want to invite Her Excellency Mrs. Inga Rolda King, the permanent representative of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to the United Nations. Ambassador, you have the floor, and we are pleased to have you with us today celebrating World Food Day.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, my dear friend Carla, Excellencies, colleagues, friends. As a proud co-sponsor of this event today, I begin my remarks by congratulating the Food and Agriculture Organization on its 75th anniversary. I also commend the World Food Programme for being awarded the 2020 Nobel Peace Prize. The partnership between the FAO and WFP has been the centerpiece of the global campaign to combat hunger and promote food insecurity. And on this World Food Day, St. Vincent and the Grenadines applauds these collective efforts to grow, nourish, and sustain together. Colleagues, friends, These are challenging times. The COVID-19 pandemic has significantly altered conditions for life, living, production, and globally. Life, living, and production, my apologies, globally. The hazards of climate change and environmental degradation, the spread of desert locusts, and the extensive impacts of protracted conflicts are erasing decades of progress in our fight against hunger. As shifting weather patterns, diminished biodiversity, and harmful agricultural practices lead to increased crop losses, and millions of people in conflict-affected countries from the Sahel to the Horn of Africa and across the Arabian Peninsula into Western Asia suffer acute food insecurity, we must do better to protect the most vulnerable. It is an absurd contradiction that during the 21st century, despite our modern advances in technology, the accumulation of wealth through global networks of trade and investment, and the excesses of consumerism, that so many people struggle to find a nutritious meal. The WFP's projection that the number of people in crisis level hunger may rise to 270 million by the end of 2020 speaks to our international community's collective failure to take care of each other. This stark image of widespread hunger would represent more than a famine of biblical proportions. It would be an absolute tragedy of human civilization. We can and we must do better. As we embark on the decade of action to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, urgent action is needed to avert the hunger pandemic. This requires unity, solidarity, and global commitment to tackle the imbalances and inequalities in access to food and nutrition. As we seek to rebuild from COVID-19, we must reposition our food systems to be sustainable and resilient while we cultivate greater equality across nations and peoples. And as we acknowledge that our lives depend on a healthy planet, we must adapt our public policies on several fronts to ensure climate compliance across our governments, the international private sector, and in every single household. We should invest in our small farmers to build their capacities and to help expand their market access for organic and sustainably produced foods. We must also take better care of our global commons, which provide livelihoods and sustenance to all of us. In conclusion, St. Vincent and the Grenadines commends the range of initiatives by the FAO and that promote regular access to high quality food for people everywhere. We reaffirm our support for these efforts and emphasize our commitment to sustainable food practices for the benefit of current and future generations. And before ceding the floor, let me wish you, Carla, much success as you relocate to Kenya to continue your invaluable contribution to the FAO mission around the world. The New York office will surely miss you. You are the consummate professional who goes above and beyond. Thank you for pouring your heart and gentle soul into advancing the FAO agenda in New York. Nevertheless, Kenya will surely benefit from your unwavering dedication and the invaluable contribution you will make to this important work during your tenure there. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Rhonda, and thank you for your kind words. A strong voice coming from the seats where FAO is really focusing also its activities through hand-in-hand initiatives, among others, and for your important intervention, recalling us on the challenges of climate change that is really exacerbating hunger and food insecurity, and the need to really come together to invert this trend of affairs. Thank you again, Ambassador. I will now want to give the floor to Excellency, and also Ambassador Louise Blaise, the Deputy Permanent Representative of Canada to the United Nations, recalling that Canada is the birthplace of FAO. And I'm really looking forward to hear from you, Ambassador Louise. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you very, very much, Carla. And I really wish to recognize your incredible work as you leave your role in New York. You are really one of my food heroes. So we celebrate you as well today. Thank you for your incredible dedication to this important cause. I want to thank as well the FAO and other organizers of today as we mark this incredible World Food Day. And indeed, Canada is extremely proud to have been the birthplace of the organization, and then we have remained committed to it and devoted to it, I want to say, ever since then. So thank you for inviting me to represent Canada here with you today. So this World Food Day theme is grow, nourish, and sustain, which I think are incredibly powerful words. But they remind us of the importance to reflect on how food can be grown, transported, and made accessible to all. Unfortunately, as we've heard from many of your distinguished speakers already today, we're not doing well. Hunger has been on the rise, in fact, for the past number of years. And now we're facing the economic and secondary impacts of the pandemic. And we continue to be seeing communities and even generations face a level of food insecurity that we haven't seen in decades. And those that are suffering the most are the most vulnerable. I just want to take a moment to read a very brief extract from our Minister of Development, Karina Gould, on today. She issued the statement today on World Food Days. While this immediate help is vital, and that is she's referring to the World Food WFP, it is also critical to focus on rebuilding food systems for greater resilience. Now is the time to integrate nutrition needs with agricultural production goals and view climate action objectives alongside efforts to preserve livelihoods. So it's not just about the food that is being delivered, it's about the livelihoods of those producing it. And when 2/3 of the world's smallholder farmers are women, it is crucial to include them in a decision-making and developing solution. COVID-19 has laid bare the risks and vulnerability in our food system, but it is also an opportunity to do things better. We need to find and amplify new ways to increase food productivity, reduce waste, raise income equality, and improve health and nutrition. It is also time to re-examine how to ensure that our food system stays sustainable and also supports biodiversity. End of quote. Now for me, we must ensure that food security efforts that we have underway continue and improve their inclusiveness, in particular, as the minister said, for women, youth, but also Indigenous people. Another important and forgotten and neglected actor in food are migrant workers. They deserve support, protection from the countries whose food they produce, harvest, and process. They are really true food heroes too. So are the farmers and the fishers. This is why Canada has been the lead in the Living Laboratories Initiative. This project is an integrated approach to agricultural innovation that brings farmer, scientists, and partners together to co-develop, test, implement, and monitor new practices and technologies to address agri-environmental challenges. And we do similar work in the fishing industry. And this is maybe just a moment to say that I come from a long line of fishermen. I know firsthand the harsh realities that many of those who produce or harvest or fish our food face. And they are at the front line of economic shocks and climate shocks. And I've seen it in my own family. And so I come from it honestly. I also want to I would be remiss if I didn't mention the importance that Canada places on sustainability. And this is why, of course, we made that a major team working with Kenya on the Blue Economy Conference, which we sponsored a few years ago. So I'm taking a lot of time, and I just, I'll just skip the last part of my remarks because we want to hear from the food heroes themselves and the other panelists that you have. And I just want to stop now and just congratulate all of those that we're honoring today and give them our much heartfelt gratitude. And lastly, to just wish us all a very, very happy World Food Day. Thank you very much for giving me the floor, Madam Moderator. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Luis Baez, for your important intervention and also for really recalling the important role played by migrants, indigenous people, farmers, women. This is really important. I now will invite, of course, for the first time in the World Food Day, let me invite now the Commissioner for the International Affairs.
Thank you.
The Commissioner of International Affairs, the Mayor of New York City. Please, Penny, you have the
Thank
floor.
you.
You have the floor. I'm really pleased, and we are happy to have you celebrating the World Food Day.
Well, thank you. And Miss Carla, I wish everybody's made me wish that I knew you better. Good luck in leaving New York City, but thank you for everything you've done here. Excellencies, distinguished guests, thank you for having New York City so well represented at this important celebration of World Food Day today. I'm so pleased to be joining all of you along with my colleague, Kate McKenzie, the Director of the Mayor's Office of Food Policy. Happy 75th birthday to the Food and Agricultural Organization, and congratulations to the World Food Program for the 2020 Nobel. I have to say we all needed some good news, and that was just great news. In these uncertain and unprecedented times, it remains critical that we all work together, including those of us in local leadership. COVID-19 has reinforced the extraordinary importance of local governments in managing the pandemic, as well as rebuilding back better. Today, we're gathering at a critical time, both virtually, but here in New York City, in terms of our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. As all of you know, until very recently, we were the epicenter of the pandemic in the US. And there were days this past spring where we had positive COVID-19 cases, well over 5,000 and close to 600 deaths per day. While we've had a dramatic drop in infections, we are now seeing upticks in several neighborhoods in Brooklyn and Queens. And we know this, but it bears repeating. We must all remain vigilant in wearing masks and maintaining physical distance when we can. Here in New York City, we've been in phase 4 for over 2 months, and citywide, the infection rates have hovered around 1 or 2%. And getting to this point, however, was a long and painful journey. And yes, we continue to see and feel the effects of the pandemic on our economy. It was glaringly obvious from the start that COVID-19 was affecting all of our lives, including our ability to access food and keep food on our tables. So one of the first things that Mayor de Blasio did when the pandemic first hit the city was to appoint a food czar and establish hundreds of food hubs for school children. We knew that so many of our children depended on breakfast and lunches served at the schools to get a nutritious meal every day. So that effort began in earnest very early on. And as the pandemic continued to put pressure on our local economy, and as more and more workers lost their jobs, the city expanded the services at the food hubs to feed all New Yorkers, anyone that needed access to food so that no one would go hungry. Now, to help us with these recovery efforts, Mayor de Blasio has created a series of task force that encompass every sector of our economy, of our society, including one called the Task Force on Racial Inclusion and Equity. And I want to bring that here today because something that the pandemic made very obvious here in New York City is how disproportionately the pandemic impacted our Black and Brown communities. And so this task force, along with the other ones, are working to ensure that the city's response to this crisis means that we will build back better and stronger for these communities. The city has also engaged a series of public-private partnerships towards this end. The Mayor's Fund to Advance this New York City has raised over $48 million, including more than $5.5 million in in-kind donations. The Mayor's Fund launched the COVID-19 Emergency Relief Fund. We really wanted to ensure that we were supporting our priority areas, including healthcare workers, local small businesses, displaced hourly workers, including immigrant families and youth and other vulnerable New Yorkers. And some of the things that we've done through this public and private partnership through the Mayor's Fund is provide almost 500,000 packages of shelf-stable food, fresh produce, household cleaning and personal care products, delivering 160,000 meals to healthcare professionals, EMS, morgue, and other essential workers. And it just shows, how critical it has been for the city to work with not only the public sector, but the private sector to ensure that we were supporting our food heroes, ensuring that no one in New York City went hungry. And through my office, New York City has the honor of hosting the largest diplomatic corps in the world. And so we ensured that we stayed connected to all of you so that you could talk to your communities and ensure that they knew how to get services. And this again, reinforces our commitment to localizing the SDGs. SDG 2 has always been a priority for us. COVID-19 has really enhanced what that has meant in how we think about rebuilding post in this moment that we're in. But today, the most important thing is New York City is here to honor and celebrate our food heroes. We are so pleased to be part of the World Food Day celebration, and it's an honor. You guys are going to get to hear more about the details of our programs from Kate, and I'm so honored to be here. Thank you so much, Carla.
Thank you very much, Commissioner for International Affairs in New York City. We are the ones who are really very honored and pleased, and I really want to thank for the important role played by New York City during the pandemic to ensure that really food reaches the vulnerable communities and those in need. It has been really remarkable. And we also thank for the close collaboration we have with New York City. I now give the floor to Katie McKenzie, the Director of New York City Office of Food Policy. You have the floor, Kate.
Thank you so much, Carla, and really sincere congratulations on this momentous occasion for you. Excellencies, ambassadors, distinguished colleagues and participants, together with my colleague, Penny, the Commissioner of International Affairs, I would like to welcome this important event as the host city for the United Nations in its celebration of 75 years since its founding. Today is not just one more annual celebration of World Food Day. Today, World Food Day is an entire week of virtual events integrated for the first time with the Committee on World Food Security, which normally occurs in Rome. This World Food Day is occurring in the midst of the ongoing coronavirus pandemic that has increased food insecurity dramatically in the world. This is the year food access, food workers, and food systems have received greater attention as essential human needs and services during the pandemic. New York City, as you've just heard, is not exempt from the food system impacts of COVID-19 and saw a near doubling of food insecurity to likely more than 2 million from 1.2 million before COVID-19. Today, near 1 in 4 New Yorkers is likely to be food insecure, with the greatest impact on immigrant communities and people of color. Mayor de Blasio is committed to provide all New Yorkers with food, delivering directly to homes for thousands of our COVID-19 vulnerable population. Our city is responding together with food businesses and community-based food organizations to provide all New Yorkers with adequate food. Since March, we have delivered to homes and through those schools that you've just heard about, more than 140 million meals. New York, with many cities worldwide, has been at the forefront of responding to the food and related social and economic impacts of COVID-19. Social protection systems have had to be reoriented, reorganized, or upgraded. In our case, New York's emergency humanitarian food system is being redesigned to be more resilient and integrated with the market food system. More attention is being given to the city region food system than previously. In order to respond to the dramatic impacts of COVID on the food system, city government has convened departments and agencies to work together in new ways to create a more resilient and inclusive and green city. Lessons learned over the last 8 months are likely to have an impact for years to come as New York develops its first 10-year food plan to be launched in early 2021 in parallel to preparing for the Food System Summit. New York looks forward to joining together with local, regional, and national governments and with many other actors in the first Global Summit on Food Systems next year. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you all today.
Thank you very much, Kate, and thank you very much for the role you are playing. It's really a pleasure and an honor to have the New York City joining us today. I now have a video that will be played, a video message from Mrs. Agnes Kalibata, the Special Envoy General of the 2021 Food Systems Summit. I don't think that we can hear. Can we play the video again? We can't hear. I think we have difficulties with the video. Maybe we can go to the next speaker and then we will come back to the video by the special envoy. So let me now introduce a dear colleague from FAO who has been working for many years at FAO in various positions in many fascinating and challenging locations across the world. He left FAO as a Deputy Director General in 2019, and is joining us today as a Special Representative of the Director General. We asked him to share his perspective on FAO history as we celebrate the 75th anniversary, but also his personal impressions, how FAO evolved and how it can cope with the future challenges that we are facing with. Dear Dan, it's really a pleasure to have you with us today. The floor is yours.
Okay, thanks very much, Carla, and thanks very much for the invitation. And also thanks to the earlier speakers. I think that was really inspiring and helps us, I think, looking and celebrating not only this year as we always do and kind of taking stock of where we are, but also looking back at kind of the continuity and change of the organization over the past 75 years. It's a big milestone. And of course, the world was a radically different place in 1945 and Quebec City and the beginning. But in fact, in what I'd like to highlight, I think really one of the things is kind of the striking parallels that we see between what the founders were thinking in 1945 and what they were writing about and what we have today. They were coming out, of course, of the Depression. We tend to think of it, of the UN coming out really of Second World War, but also coming out of the Depression, where agriculture and food in kind of the larger sense was, of course, such a major issue. Farmers dumping food because there weren't markets, trade restrictions, became tariffs increasingly higher, poverty, hunger. They knew that food and agriculture was really critical. And I think, although they didn't use the term, they really looked at it in terms of food systems, the food or their food system, and recognized that it wasn't working, and they needed to rethink how they were going to do this. Most striking, I think, is that they weren't focused particularly on production. It was part of it, but really were focused on what, as they termed it, freedom from hunger. And the idea then was to create this intergovernmental organization, the first, as you mentioned, of specialized agencies, in addressing separate and collective actions to put us on the path, as they put it, that would lead to the eradication of hunger and poverty. I mean, really, the writing and what they were talking about could come out of Agenda 2030. Not an easy proposition in 1945, and it's always been a challenge, I think, for us and other specialized agencies to make an impact, be successful in making an impact as an intergovernmental body, reaching decisions through consensus, how you blend what happens at the country with what country level work with the normative. And it hasn't always been easy. In fact, the first Director General of FAO, John Boyd Orr, one of the visionaries, Scottish physician, also a nutritionist, resigned in 1948 after making very possibly overly ambitious proposals on the creation of a World Food Board, something that we might think of as maybe something like a mandatory WFP today. And the members rejected, and he resigned. This was 1948. In 1949, although unfortunately not very well known, he won the Nobel Peace Prize largely for that work at FAO, among other things. And he would certainly be pleased to know that WFP has won now in this year. And I think in particular, he would be really pleased also with Security Council Resolution 2417. That really, between the two of them, is really, I think, what was driving Boyd Orr and a lot of the others. Of course, nowadays, much different. Science has evolved. Lots of things have evolved. There were 39 members to begin with, now 194. People were certainly, let's say, limited in the beginning in their expertise. Now we have expertise from all over the world, local level. We just know a lot more. We know that women are central to all of this. We understand better the development, humanitarian, peace connections. We have more means to do this, and certainly it's a different place, and we have made a lot of progress. And I think even the visionaries, I think, would be surprised at how much progress we're making. On the other hand, of course, we're not doing as well as we should. We aren't, even without COVID, as many of you have said, meeting our objectives, meeting our targets, and things need to change. And I think over time, when you look at kind of the legacy of the founders in this, I think they were remarkably visionary in what they were hoping to achieve, which is essentially what we're hoping to achieve, all of us collectively. And they recognized that the situation at the time wasn't acceptable, and they needed to rethink how to do this. And that, I think, is, again, where we are thinking of the food systems summit coming up, called by the Secretary General next year, or the work that leads into that. And I think really that is the lasting legacy that we cannot accept. Really, we can the present numbers and the situation. We need to rethink how we're going to do this, and we need to do this through both collective and separate action. So thank you, Carla. It's been a pleasure to work with you in New York, and I look forward to seeing you soon in Nairobi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dan, for your testimony of this important trajectory. We are really very pleased to have you with us celebrating this important day. I don't think that we can play the video. We are still having really problems with the video. So what I will do, I will straight ahead handle the floor to the next moderator, Coco Shiwana, who is the director of the WFP office in New York, congratulating again WFP for the Nobel Prize. The floor is yours, Coco.
Thank you, Carla. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to moderate today's panel on food hero stories. But before that, I would like to take a moment to thank my good friend and colleague, Carla, for excellent collaboration over the past several years. Carla is leaving New York for her new assignment in Kenya, as you heard. And I know that our friends and colleagues today in this session will join me in thanking her for her contributions in New York and also wishing her well in Kenya. Now back to the Food Heroes panel. As we're all aware, the COVID-19 pandemic has shook the world unexpectedly. What we have been doing is to ensure that we can prevent a hunger pandemic. Many people rose to this challenge and adapted their way of working to address this dramatic situation and rose to the occasion. It is my pleasure now to introduce our three panelists today. The first is Myrna Cunningham Kane. She is the president of the Fund for the Development of the Indigenous Peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean. And an indigenous Mezquita from Nicaragua, sorry. She is a globally recognized indigenous rights activist, former chair of the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, and current president of the Center for Indigenous Peoples Autonomy and Development. She serves as the chairperson of the steering committee of the Indigenous Peoples Forum at IFAD and as board member of the Indigenous Peoples Assistance Facility. Welcome, Myrna. Our second panelist is Ciara Sidel. She is the urban farm manager of Randall Island's Park Alliance. A Queens native, she is committed to growing food in educational spaces in New York City and engaging the public in learning and discussion around the intersections of farming, justice, sustainability in our urban landscape. Welcome, Ciara. Our third panelist is Marie-Rose Umotuni. She is the program associate with WFP Rwanda, where she coordinates FAO, IFAD, WFP, and UN Women's joint program on accelerating progress towards the economic empowerment of rural women. She's passionate about rural women's empowerment and has played a key role in the successful implementation of this joint program. With this introduction, I would now like to address the two-part questions to our panelists, starting with Myrna, then Ciara, then Marie-Rose. Each panelist will have 5 minutes to please share with us about the food heroes and your work in your respective areas, and to discuss the biggest challenges that you faced since the pandemic. Let us first begin with Myrna. Myrna, over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting us to this celebration on this important day. Indigenous peoples are food heroes. For indigenous peoples of the world, the arrival of the pandemic has caused serious effects that are still difficult to assess, but they have demonstrated a remarkable capacity to react and resilience facing COVID-19. Far from waiting on external aid, they have acted and faced the gigantic challenge. They have maintained food systems for generations. And in the face of the pandemic, they not only reacted by trying to secure food, but they did so within the framework of their ancestral knowledge, with a diet based on local nature, including those that have a preventive function against the effects of the virus. They are a hero in the conservation and exchange of native seeds that not only allow us to conserve biodiversity, but in the context of the pandemic, they allow us to overcome nutritional deficiencies. This has been done by numerous organizations like the NASA people in Colombia, like the indigenous women in Guatemala, in Mexico, strengthening family farming, thus invigorating the local economy by recreating the exchange of knowledge. Communities have been heroic in promoting the development of autonomous gastronomy, as for example, the Guarani women in Paraguay, or the indigenous youth of the indigenous Terra Madre of slow food. The communities have also strengthened the nutritional sustainability of their members. For example, in Belize, the National Garifuna Council, through the Cassava Processing Demonstration Center, has trained the community in how to get the most out of indigenous plant, but also constitute a food bank for the communities. They have had a hero behavior with broad gestures of solidarity with other communities and peoples to help overcome the lack of food. For example, we have seen fishermen of the Tirua among the Mapuche in territory who on their own initiative distributed fish to needy community. In addition, there are communities like the Toro Toro in Bolivia or Comalapa in Guatemala or in the indigenous Miskitos in Nicaragua who hold trade fairs for food produce in the area based on mutual and solidarity agreements, overcoming the absence of other markets closed by the pandemic. But I would like also to recognize as food hero, a partner organizations of local communities and indigenous peoples. The Hunger Project that is based in the US, in other countries, that has mobilized 500,000 of community leaders in 13 countries around the world in the last 7 months. These volunteers have been working tirelessly to monitor food security of their families, identifying ways to mitigate potential challenges. And all of this is possible because the Hunger Project has laid the groundwork for this response through women-focused, community-led development, a methodology that asks people living with hunger and poverty to be the drivers of their own development. And my third food heroes are indigenous-led funds, such as FILAC, Tepteba, Samburu Women Trust, AINI, 7th Generation Fund, Pawanka Fund, that through their flexible, holistic, and grounded approach have been mitigating the impacts of the pandemic in very isolated and remote communities. The biggest challenge that we have faced is that indigenous peoples is the lack of visibility and recognition of our knowledge system and our good practices. In fact, in many cases, there has been an increase of land grabbing, discrimination, criminalization, and concession over natural resources in our territories in the midst of the pandemic. That is why in Latin America, we have created between the FILAC and the indigenous people's main organization, a regional indigenous platform to highlight the voices and highlight the inputs and whatever indigenous peoples are doing to face the pandemic.
Thank you, Myrna, for not only sharing the very important perspective of the indigenous community, but also sharing with us the rich examples of solutions and solidarity including with the local community. Thank you. I now ask the second panelist, Ciara, to share with us her thoughts. Over to you, Ciara.
Thank you, and thank you all for having me here today to participate in this conversation. I'll start by saying that farmers are food heroes. Farm workers are food heroes. Really, everyone and anyone who participates in our food supply chain are my food heroes, all of our food heroes. I'm going to speak today about my work in urban agriculture. I've been farming in New York City off and on for the past 10 years, but consistently for the past 5 years in educational farming spaces. What I mean by educational farming spaces are farms or community garden-like spaces that are bringing young people into the spaces to learn about farming. They're participating in the growing process alongside me and alongside our farmers. In doing that, we are producing a lot of food. And we're using that food as part of our program. So for 3 years, I was working at Harlem Grown, a wonderful nonprofit started by Tony Hillary that is working mostly in central Harlem to bring urban agriculture to the community as a form of youth development and training young people, mostly young people of color, to become farmers and play a role in bringing food directly to their communities. For the past 2 years, I've been working at the Randall's Island Park Alliance, managing their 1-acre urban farm that is really set up for education. This past winter, we had spent so much time developing curriculum, engaging with partners at local schools in the area. And when I say local, it's mostly East Harlem and the South Bronx, right over the bridge from the island where I work. And we were excited to engage young people in our edible education program, field trips, hands-on learning, that they would be able to bring back to their school communities. Of course, when COVID hit, that was 1 or 2 weeks into our season. So all of that planning went out of the window, and we had to shift. And well, maybe we didn't have to shift, but we did decide to shift. We decided to pivot our thinking, and we took what was set up as an educational space and thought about how we can increase our production, how we could change our plans and ensure that the food that we would be growing would go to folks in need. Traditionally speaking, we would be producing our food and incorporating it into cooking lessons with kids, which is a wonderful way of engaging our communities. We still wanted to continue engaging our communities. The whole purpose of what we do is to bring what we do to as many New Yorkers as possible. Of course, we were short-staffed, we had limited time for training, and we were working independently. We couldn't work from home, farmers can't work from home, but we did have to work alone for some time, and that made a lot of the tasks a lot harder on our bodies, on our mental health, all of that. Supporting and navigating those challenges were huge. And in doing, while doing that, I think we were all, my team and I were all motivated by the community partners that allowed us to pursue this pivot with some ease, in fact. So over the course of the season, we've donated over 2,500 pounds of food to various community partners. We've partnered with food pantries in Harlem, New York Common Pantry, and Little Sisters of Assumption Family Health Services. They have been fantastic, and it's the people on the ground at these pantries, the folks who are coordinating their operation, the folks on staff, and then the many volunteers who also are absolute food heroes. And then there are the mutual aid networks that popped up throughout the city in response to the need in all of our communities. And we've been diverting some of our food over to them as well. So I want to name Woke Foods, an organization in the Bronx, Heart of Dinner downtown that is sending meals to Chinese elderly throughout the city, and to the Mott Haven Community Fridge. And community refrigerators are a wonderful way of incorporating quick grab and go donations for people in the community to just stop by on the corner and pick up food. And we're going to be doing that through the fall. Adjacent to our food donations has been our work in pivoting towards collecting food scraps. So in the face of COVID-19, the city wasn't able to collect food scraps from the community anymore. And we historically did not do that on the island. We had a very small educational operation going on. Since May, we've diverted 5,000 pounds of compost in partnership with a group called Astoria Pug in Queens. That's been a wonderful opportunity to not only engage with people in our Queens neighborhoods, but also to incorporate a program that is super important for the farm's sustainability. We've been able to produce enough compost to extend our season, provide nutrients to our soil for the fall, produce more food, and engage in future donations. So everyone who has made all of that possible, they are all food heroes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ciara, for sharing also your rich perspective, but also reminding us of the important role of urban agriculture and the critical role that the farmers play, but also that critical role of the educational component. Thank you to you. Our third panelist is Marie Rose. So please, over to you, Marie Rose, to share your perspective.
Thank you, Coco. Ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this event for giving me the opportunity to speak about my experience with the food heroes in this event. The food heroes that I'm going to talk about today are the 1,713 vulnerable rural women from Rwanda, supported by the joint program, Rural Women Economic Empowerment, JPRE. As it was mentioned by the introductions about this program, it is jointly implemented by 4 UN agencies, which are WFP, FAO, IFAD, and UN Women. The strategic results of the program is to secure rural women livelihoods and rights in the context of sustainable development. And one of its strategic outcomes is to improve food and nutrition security for rural women in Rwanda. Over the years, I've witnessed the program interventions creating impact in terms of food and nutrition security to almost 9,000 family members from beneficiaries. The trainings of rural women cooperatives on improved agricultural practices, post-harvest handling and storage, awareness on nutrition have enhanced household food and nutrition security. Due to the interventions of the joint program, I'm happy and proud to say that the food heroes that I'm talking about today have been able to increase productivity for their household livelihood and improved income. They've been able to improve their capacity in terms of post-harvest handling and storage facilities, which have reduced food losses and issues related to food storage. Greenhouse farming of crops such as tomato, cucumber, and eggplants have enabled rural women for enhanced balanced diet and nutrition at the household level. Fruit seedlings distribution and small-scale irrigation for a climate-smart agriculture have created nutritional value, which have not only increased the number of meals and dietary diversity at the household level, but have diversified the source of income and access to good market for increased income. In summary, I can say that all the interventions have enabled rural women to avail different type of food at the household level, to diversify their source of income and create more assets to secure their livelihoods, which enabled them to become resilient to food insecurity. The major challenge that we have faced during 2020 has been the outbreak of COVID-19, which has created a challenging situation in the work that we do in the field. Limited travels and physical interactions have had an impact, a negative impact on the productive and commercialized activities of rural women groups and cooperatives. To some extent, all farming and agricultural value chains have been affected by the pandemic, which created shocks in terms of food reserves, food security, and sustaining what have been attained. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Rose, for sharing also your work on a joint program on rural women. And it's also wonderful to see the beautiful photos. Now with this, we've heard from the 3 panelists, the food heroes, some of the challenges because of COVID. Now I'd like to have the final round of question in 1 minute in terms of forward look. So given that some of the key lessons learned from COVID, what are some of the key lessons that could be applied to post-COVID as we build back better, or as some say, build forward better? So in 1 minute, could we hear from Myrna some of your forward look thoughts, and then to Ciara, then to Mary Rose. Over to you, Myrna.
Thank you, Coco. The most important lesson that we have learned is the confirmation of the enormous capacity of indigenous peoples at community level to respond to a problem as serious as the pandemic. If we want to advance in the future, it is essential for governments and international organizations to respect, do not obstruct the actions of the community, to support their communities respecting their collective rights, which are the basis for the self-development.
Thank you, Myrna. Over to you, Ciara.
I agree with everything that Marina just said. Investing in the local food system, the regional food system, and in the people that have led the initiatives and done so, immediately when the need arose. They are resilient, we are resilient, and the government needs to be able to support that through funding, through resources, policy, in building capacity for farmers, for people within the food system who are trying to grow, who are trying to provide food for as many people as possible.
Thank you, Ciara. Over to you, Mary Rose.
Going forward, I have learned that there is greater need to create interventions that sustains food chains in terms of food reserves. We've realized that savings and credit groups have enabled rural women to cope with the pandemic food price crisis, which would encourage to continue in the future. And lastly, we have seen that engagement of men in food and nutrition interventions have played a major role in achieving results and sustaining the activities of the joint program. Thank you.
Thank you all to the three panelists. We are a little pressed for time, but I understand there's some questions, comments, and also requests for interventions from the floor. So I have a list of 5 member states so far to make the interventions. It would be Brazil, Chile, Russia, Mexico, and Hungary. Given the time constraints, please keep your remarks short, but we will also be very pleased to post any statements online. With that, I call upon the distinguished representative of Brazil. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Coco, and I'll be as brief as I can. First of all, congratulate FAO on the 75th anniversary, and a special mention to Carla, who has been a trusted partner in my first few months here in New York. Also, special congratulations to the World Food Program on the 2020 Nobel Peace Prize. Just very briefly, congratulate the organization of this event. I think it's very useful to have focused and on the micro, on the heroes, as we put, who have been facing the challenges, the additional challenges posed by COVID on the goals to global nutritional security. What I think is still missing, and I hope this is something that can be addressed in the Food Systems Summit next year, is the macro dimension of global nutrition security. And in this, we cannot tackle this if we don't look at issues such as trade barriers, both tariff and non-tariff, and massive domestic agricultural support in many countries, which creates an additional burden and obstacle for smallholder farmers, particularly in developing countries. So I think these are issues that will have to be tackled, and I fully second what my colleague from Italy said, that we have to reduce barriers to the movement of food across the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. I call upon the distinguished representative now of Chile. Sir, Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the panelists for the presentation. This is certainly not the best environment to celebrate the World Food Day, but we must redouble our effort and resolve. Allow me also to congratulate the World Food Program for the well-deserved Nobel Prize just awarded. COVID-19 pandemic threatens food and nutritional security with a disproportionate impact on less developed countries, deepening inequalities as well as poverty, extreme poverty, malnutrition, and hunger, particularly amongst the most vulnerable, including women and girls. As a result, in Latin America, the increase of insecure food people will be of 20 million. In this scenario, it is essential to take measures to protect agricultural supply chains as it has been mentioned, and avoid endangering food security and nutrition, factors that can have a lot of impact in the stability, political stability of states. The problem and the solution must encompass the multiple dimensions that affect the environment, production chains, and the basic needs of our society. For Chile, one of the key elements to combat the pandemic is collaboration, both multi-sectoral collaboration at national level and coherence at multilateral level. All governments must work together with civil society and the private sector to guarantee the participation of all actors in building sustainable resilience. The integration of agricultural production systems with nutrition and health is of utmost importance. It is necessary to adopt public policies that promote sustainable food systems based on healthy diets, because sustainability of production and consumption system is essential to achieve sustainable food system. Finally, with this objective in mind, Chile assumed the leadership in promoting the International Year of Fruits and Vegetables 2021, bearing in mind the need to face the enormous challenges related to food at a global level, reduce food loss and waste, and building agricultural system more resilient to climate change. We look forward for the Food System Summit next year, and allow me to thank and wish the best to Mrs. Carla Mukavi for the help here in New York and in her new functions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador, also for your important contribution. I now call upon the distinguished representative of Russia. Mr. Varganov, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. First of all, I would like to congratulate all of us with World Food Day. Despite some estimates, the world is not on track to achieve SDG 2 by 2030, we still look positively at the huge potential of the global agricultural and related sectors to mobilize and accelerate progress towards realizing the zero hunger vision. We would like to commend the specialized UN system entities for their tireless efforts in facilitating the activities of the international community on this track. This fully applies to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations that celebrates its 75th anniversary today, as well as to the World Food Program that has received the Nobel Peace Prize recently in recognition of its noble mission, and we would like to congratulate the program with that. Russia appreciates the high level and quality of cooperation with FAO and WFP on a wide range of issues within their respective mandates. We are looking forward to further enhance our proven strategic partnership. It is exemplified, for instance, by our continuous financial contribution to the WFP, amounting to $450 million since 2003, as well as many joint projects and events with FAO. Both agencies have recently received congratulations from the Russian Foreign Minister, Mr. Sergei Lavrov. I would like also commend our other valuable partners strongly contributing to the fight against hunger and malnutrition, including IFAD, WHO, UNICEF, UNDP, and many others. On a separate note, we would like to thank Ms. Carla Mukavi, who is moving to Kenya, for the cooperation we've had these years. And happy World Food Day. Thank you very much.
Thank you also for your important contribution. I now call upon the distinguished representative of Hungary, Ms. Zelani. Over to you.
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to apologize on behalf of Her Excellency Katalin Anna Mária Bogyai, permanent representative of Hungary to the United Nations, who due to her other commitments couldn't be here with us, and asked me to make a statement instead. Madam Chair, thank you for organizing this timely event that, with the socio-economic crisis caused by the COVID-19 and the Food System Summit coming up next fall, gives the opportunity to reflect this challenging issue. In 1979, when the World Food Day was established by the FAO on the initiative of late Hungarian Minister of Agriculture, Dr. Pál Romány, the world was facing different food challenges than now. In fact, Now, global hunger could be eliminated with only 1/4 of the food wasted just in Europe and the US. Hungary is proud that while globally an average of 30% of food is wasted, in the European Union, this number is only 20%. And in Hungary, only 10% of the food purchased ends up in the garbage can. But in order to draw attention on a zero waste in the agri-food industry, Hungarian National Food Chain Safety Office initiated a vast communication campaign with several different actions and platforms. As a result of the Wasteless project, a 4% decrease was observed in household waste, which is the greatest achievement in this regard. The most ambitious part of this program is to introduce the sustainable consumption to all children in Hungary. During the last 3 years, every student between the age of 10 and 12 receives the message of this program in the primary school. This year, the education activity was supported by online tools as a result of the COVID situation. All of these materials can be downloaded and used by other nations from the webpage of the program in English too. Adult consumers were also targeted by the practical ideas and guides based on primary research results and also by charity programs. According to latest data, all Hungarians received news about the Wasteless project 9 times already on average. Food business operators, universities, and NGOs were also partners to Wasteless. As a result of their joint efforts, 4 professional guides were published in English and in Hungarian, collecting good practices for food processors, food retailers, restaurants, and NGOs. The art is in the details, and we can all share responsibility with our everyday small commitments for our future. Thank you.
Thank you, and also for that important contribution. I now close the floor in terms of interventions from the member states. I don't think we had any questions for our panelists. But before we end the session, I understand there's also opportunity to see the video from our Special Envoy on Food Systems Summit. So handing over to the technicians. I don't think the volume is working. Okay, so it doesn't seem that the volume is working. Apologies on our behalf of the group. But I would like to thank the 3 panelists. Really exciting work that you are doing amidst this challenges, historic challenges, some would say crisis. But we also see the opportunities, especially through these actions and solutions that we did here, engaging the youth, the local community, the women, indigenous communities. So it is possible. We do look forward to a continuing partnership towards also a transformed food systems ahead of also the Food Systems Summit. So with that, I now have the pleasure of handing over to Ms. Teresa Liu, the head of the FAO New York Liaison Office. Over to you, Teresa.
Thank you, Coco. Excellencies, dear colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of FAO, firstly, a big thank you to everyone for joining us today to celebrate the World Food Day. The videos of the President of the General Assembly, the Secretary General provided very powerful messages for this celebration. The videos of Ms. Kalibata and the video of the World Food Day will be available online later. So thank you, Ambassador Akram, President of the ECOSOC, for your great support on this historic day. I want to thank the permanent missions of Canada, Italy, St. Vincent, and Grenadines for co-hosting this event. And thanks also to our distinguished representatives from Brazil, Chile, Russia, and Hungary for your intervention. Thanks to all other member states for your active participation. I want to also thank the Mayor's Office of New York City as the host city of the United Nations headquarters for your valued support and insights. I thank our distinguished panelists and food heroes for their inspiring stories, which helped us gain further appreciation for the challenges of making food available for all at time of global crisis. Last but not least, I thank our co-hosts, the FAO and WFP, for putting together this event. A special thank you to our dear colleague, Carla, for your leadership and dedication for over the years. And we sincerely wish you well in your new endeavors in Kenya and beyond. I want to join all in congratulating FAO again for its 75th anniversary and WFP for winning this year's Nobel Peace Prize. Each year, World Food Day is both a cause for celebration and a time for reflection. Food security is at the heart of poverty reduction and fundamental to achievements of all other SDGs. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown us the fragility that exists in our food system. Both urban and rural areas have been impacted, as we've heard today. In urban areas like New York City, disruptions in supply chains have increased food prices, which has disproportionately affected the most vulnerable. Meanwhile, rural smallholder farmers and traditionally vulnerable groups, including women and indigenous communities, have shouldered an even heavier burden from the global crisis due to disrupted access to seeds, fertilizers, transportation, markets, and financing. The discussions today have made it clear that the short and long-term interventions to food insecurity must be considered together. There is an urgency to redesign and reinvigorate our policies and actions on how we produce, process, market, consume, and dispose of food to build back better. As reflected in the stories of our food heroes, we must not only do more to bring new voices and actions to the table, but also invest in them to unleash their creativity and potential, and to scale up innovation and the food system approaches that are sustainable for both people and the planet. IFAD specializes in investing in rural communities, especially smallholder farmers who produce 50% of the world calories that feed us all, and focuses on assisting the most vulnerable groups, including women and indigenous people. 2 weeks ago, IFAD became the first UN entity to receive a public credit rating. This will allow us to access greater financial resources in partnerships with public and private institutions to expand our work together towards leaving no one behind. Recently, IFAD launched the Adaptation for Smallholder Agriculture program to scale up investment in smallholders for climate smart agriculture, and recognizing the critical role of the private sectors in scaling up innovative solutions as well as long-term investments. IFAD recently launched the Private Sector Finance Program. IFAD also initiated the COVID-19 Rural Poor Stimulus Facility, which provides seed funding for relief efforts for the most impacted rural people. Thank you, Canada, for joining us as our first partner in this endeavor, as more like-minded partners are getting on board. We are also currently working with member states to secure additional funding in our 12th replenishment cycle to serve rural communities and help them build back better. We invite everyone to work with us together. In partnership with the Rome-based agencies and with all our partners, IFAD is committed to continuing the critical work ahead of all of us. COVID-19 has presented us with unprecedented challenges as well as historical responsibilities to rebuild our food system to be more inclusive, resilient, green, and sustainable for all. Let us further strengthen our efforts to grow, nourish, sustain together toward a world without hunger and malnutrition. So thank you again for joining us today to celebrate World Food Day 2020. Have a great day and evening, everyone. We hope to see you next year.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Happy World Food Day.
Happy World Food Day.
Happy World Food Day to everyone. Excellencies, thank you very much for joining us. We wish you well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carla.
Thank you. Thank you, darling.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy World Food Day.
Thank you,
Thank
Carla.
you, everyone.
Happy World Food Day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carla. Wonderful.
Thank you all. Good to see you, Ambassador. Happy World Food Day.
You too.